There are moments when a single act of arrogance cracks open a truth far bigger than anyone expects. And this story begins at the polished gates of a wealthy man's mansion. On a quiet morning, a tired biker, covered in road dust after riding for more than a full day, approached the property, simply looking for directions. He knocked politely, unaware that the man behind the door carried a pride sharpened by years of comfort. When the door swung open, the rich man didn't even try to hide his disdain. He looked the biker up and down, laughed loudly, and mocked his worn clothes as if poverty were something to be entertained by. His cruel words echoed through the marble entrance, cutting deeper than the biker let show. But what the rich man did not know, what he could not possibly imagine, was that the man he humiliated belonged to a brotherhood built on loyalty thicker than blood, a community forged on long highways, relentless storms, and the kind of hardship that binds people together in ways money never could. The biker walked away quietly, swallowing the humiliation with the same strength that had carried him over thousands of miles. Yet the story did not end at that doorstep. Humiliation is a spark, and in the wrong hands it can burn, but in the right ones, it can illuminate a truth waiting to be revealed. As the sun set that evening, the biker's story traveled faster than the miles he had ridden. His brothers and sisters listened, not with rage, but with a sense of justice that ran deep through their shared history. They knew what it meant to be judged by appearance, to be dismissed by those who saw only leather and dirt instead of loyalty and heart. And silently, without a hint of the storm they were about to become, they decided to stand by him in the only way their world understood, together. By sunrise, engines began to rumble across the town like distant thunder rolling over the hills. One solitary rider became 10, 10 became 50, and 50 grew into more than 200 strong. They rode as a single force, not for revenge, but for truth, a truth the rich man would soon be forced to face. Neighbors peeked through windows, startled by the sight of such unity, unaware of the lesson that was about to unfold at the very doorstep, where arrogance had spoken too loudly. And as the massive formation of bikers approached the mansion, their engines humming in perfect harmony, the once confident rich man froze behind his ornate windows. He had mocked what he did not understand, laughed at a man whose story he never cared to learn. Now, 200 riders had arrived, not to threaten him, but to reveal the truth he had failed to see, that dignity is not measured by wealth, and respect is owed to every soul who walks, rides, or struggles their way through this world. When the mansion gates finally opened that morning, the rich man stepped outside expecting to find chaos or confrontation. Instead, he found something far more disarming. Hundreds of bikers standing in absolute silence, their presence heavy with meaning rather than violence. Their stillness alone carried a weight no raised voice ever could. The rich man's confidence faltered as he realized this was not an act of intimidation, but of solidarity, a display of unity so powerful it rendered his wealth insignificant. For the first time in a long while, he felt small on the ground he believed he owned. The biker he had mocked stood near the front of the group, not with anger in his eyes, but with a quiet dignity that cut deeper than any retaliation. He had returned, not to shame the man who belittled him, but to let truth speak louder than the insult he had endured. The rich man swallowed hard as their eyes met, feeling a sting of discomfort rise in his chest. The biker's calm composure challenged every assumption he had made the day before, about class, about value, about worth. Neighbors slowly gathered along the sidewalks, drawn by the unusual scene. They whispered among themselves, some shocked, others curious, all trying to understand why so many riders had converged on one doorstep. The biker community, sensing the tension but refusing to succumb to it, remained respectful and composed. Their silence wasn't empty. It was intentional, a reminder that strength was not always loud. The rich man, surrounded by witnesses, felt the pressure of his own arrogance closing in around him. A tall woman stepped forward from the group, a veteran rider with decades of road etched into her posture. She addressed the rich man with a calm, steady voice, recounting the biker's journey from the day before, the exhausting miles ridden to deliver supplies to a struggling friend, the long night spent navigating unforgiving weather, and the simple request for directions that had been met with mockery. Her words painted a picture of resilience the rich man had never imagined, and as she spoke, the weight of his ignorance settled heavily on his shoulders. By the time she finished, the rich man could no longer hide the shame creeping across his expression. The story he had dismissed as unworthy now stood before him in full depth and humanity. He realized he had judged a man who possessed more loyalty and courage than he himself had ever shown. And in that moment, surrounded by 200 witnesses and the truth he had tried to laugh away, he felt the first tremor of humility crack his polished exterior. The rich man's voice trembled as he attempted to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Years of entitlement had left him fluent in mockery, but speechless in accountability. The silence of the bikers pushed him to confront the truth he had avoided for so long. That character is not shaped by wealth, but by the way a person treats those they believe have nothing to offer. He lowered his gaze, not because he feared the riders, but because he feared what he now saw in himself. The mocked biker finally stepped forward, his boots crunching softly on the gravel driveway. He spoke gently, explaining that he had not come seeking revenge. He had come because the rich man needed to understand the cost of his words, not for the biker's sake, but for his own. His humility disarmed the crowd, revealing a form of strength that even 200 riders could not amplify. The rich man felt a knot tighten in his chest as he realized the biker had chosen empathy over anger, offering a lesson instead of a threat. Other bikers began sharing their own stories, experiences of being judged for their appearance, dismissed because of their clothes, or ridiculed for lives that demanded grit rather than glamour. Each story carried a quiet truth, that hardship often breeds the deepest compassion, and that people with the least material wealth often possess the richest hearts. The rich man listened, absorbing every word like someone piecing together a new understanding of the world. As the testimonies unfolded, the neighbors watching from the street felt their own perspectives shifting. They had seen the rich man as a symbol of success, someone untouchable in his grandeur, but now they saw him stripped of the armor that money had built. And they saw the bikers, often misunderstood, standing as a unified force of loyalty, kindness, and lived experience. The contrast between them was no longer about class. It was about character, and character was winning. By the time the last rider finished speaking, the atmosphere had changed. What began as a confrontation had transformed into something profoundly human, a moment where truth, vulnerability, and collective strength merged into an unforgettable lesson. The rich man stood still, humbled by the stories he had heard, realizing that the world he had built for himself was far smaller than the one these riders carried in their hearts. As the emotions in the air settled, the rich man's wife stepped out onto the grand porch, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. She had heard the engines from inside, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight of hundreds of riders standing in respectful silence on her driveway. Her eyes moved from the crowd to her husband, and the tension etched across his face told her everything. Without hesitation, she approached the group, bowing her head slightly as a gesture of acknowledgement. Unlike her husband, she carried no arrogance. Her voice trembled with genuine curiosity as she asked what had brought so many people to their home. The veteran woman biker gently explained what had happened the day before, choosing her words with care to avoid humiliation. The wife listened intently, her hand instinctively rising to her chest as the truth unfolded. Shock washed over her features, followed by disappointment, not in the bikers, but in her husband. She had always believed that wealth should be accompanied by kindness, yet here she stood realizing how far her husband had strayed from that principle. She turned to him slowly, her silence louder than any accusation. The rich man felt her gaze and lowered his head again, the weight of his choices pressing more heavily than before. In the presence of his wife, neighbors, and hundreds of strangers who embodied loyalty with every breath, he could no longer hide behind pride. He felt exposed, not because of the crowd, but because he had finally been forced to confront the man he had become. Shame coursed through him like a cold wave, shaking the foundation of the identity he had built around wealth and superiority. Sensing the internal battle unfolding before them, the bikers did not jeer or condemn. Instead, they stood united in a silent message. Change is possible, but it begins with acknowledgement. The mocked biker stepped closer and told the wealthy man's wife that he bore no ill toward her family. He clarified that he had simply asked for directions and had not intended to disrupt their home. His calm demeanor softened the tension, creating a space where truth could breathe without hostility. That unexpected humility shifted something inside the wife. She reached out to the biker, thanking him for his patience and apologizing on behalf of her household. Her sincerity created a ripple through the crowd. Even the neighbors watching from afar felt the gravity of the moment. It was rare to witness a situation where those with the least material power carried themselves with the most emotional strength. And it was even rarer to see someone with wealth recognize their own failings in such a public way. With the tension softened, the rich man finally found the strength to speak. His voice cracked as he admitted how wrong he had been, confessing that he had allowed comfort and privilege to blind him to the struggles of others. He explained that he had grown accustomed to judging people at a glance, assuming that anyone who looked worn or tired lacked value. As he spoke, his words landed differently, not as excuses, but as a painful truth he was only just beginning to understand. The biker community listened without interrupting, showing him the same respect he had failed to show a stranger. The biker he had mocked stepped forward again, not with anger, but with an unexpected grace. He told the rich man that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, but about choosing to learn from it. He explained that every mile he rode taught him something about the world, about endurance, humility, and the quiet ways people reveal who they truly are. He reminded the wealthy man that even in moments of weakness, there is room for growth if a person is willing to let their pride fall away. The rich man's wife stood beside her husband now, supporting him not out of obligation, but out of hope that this moment might be the turning point he desperately needed. The surrounding crowd felt the shift too. What started as a confrontation had evolved into a moment of profound transformation, a moment where vulnerability replaced arrogance, and humility stepped in to rebuild what pride had broken. The neighbors watching began to whisper among themselves, moved by the raw honesty unfolding before them. As the conversation continued, some bikers shared stories of their own turning points, moments when they, too, had been forced to confront the parts of themselves they weren't proud of. Their honesty created a bridge between two worlds rarely aligned, the world of those defined by wealth and the world of those defined by resilience. The rich man listened closely, realizing that the riders were not there to punish him. They were there to help him see life through a lens he had never bothered to look through. By the time silence fell again, the rich man felt something shift within him, something deeper than guilt, something closer to awakening. Surrounded by hundreds of people who had every reason to walk away, he found himself being given a chance he had not earned. And in that gift, he understood the truth he had ignored for far too long. That respect is not a privilege reserved for the wealthy, but a fundamental right owed to every soul who crosses our path. As the morning sun climbed higher, its warm glow softened the tension that had once filled the mansion grounds. One of the elder bikers stepped forward, his leather jacket worn by decades of wind and road, his voice calm and steady as he spoke. He reminded the rich man that people often forget how fragile dignity can be when life becomes too comfortable. He explained that true strength comes not from wealth or status, but from the way one chooses to lift others, especially when the world convinces you they are beneath you. His words resonated through the quiet crowd, creating a sense of clarity that settled deeply into the rich man's heart. The rich man, still shaken by everything he had witnessed, looked around at the sea of riders who had gathered in solidarity. For the first time, he saw them not as outsiders, but as human beings carrying stories far more valuable than the luxury that surrounded him. He realized how distorted his perspective had become, shaped by years of judging others from behind iron gates and marble walls. With each passing second, he felt layers of arrogance fall away, revealing a vulnerability he had hidden for far too long. A young rider stepped forward, sharing a story of a time he too had made a cruel judgment and paid for it with regret. He explained how a moment of thoughtlessness had cost him a friendship he cherished, teaching him that compassion must always come before pride. His honesty pierced through the air, painting a vivid picture of how even the strongest people can fall short, and how growth often begins with the courage to admit it. The rich man listened closely, recognizing himself in the young biker's confession. The mock biker then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small package. He handed it to the wealthy man's wife, explaining that it held medicine for the friend he had been trying to reach the day before. The wife looked down at the package, stunned by the symbolism. This man, who had been humiliated at their doorstep, had still carried empathy for someone else, even while enduring mistreatment. She felt tears gather as she realized how deeply wrong the previous day's assumptions had been. That moment broke whatever pride remained in the rich man. He felt a sting behind his eyes as he looked at the biker who had shown nothing but dignity from the start. He understood now that he had mocked someone who embodied values he himself lacked: loyalty, humility, and the strength to remain kind even in the face of cruelty. And with this realization, he felt something shift inside him, the unmistakable beginning of change. By now, the entire neighborhood had gathered, standing shoulder to shoulder along the sidewalks, witnessing a transformation they never imagined they would see. Children clutched their parents' hands. Elderly residents leaned on canes. Shop owners stepped outside, letting their businesses pause for a moment just to watch. What had started as a private act of cruelty had become a public lesson in humanity, unfolding like a powerful story told in real time. The biker's presence, once intimidating, now felt like a grounding force, a reminder that dignity belongs to everyone, regardless of wealth. The rich man finally stepped closer to the biker he had mocked, his posture no longer rigid with pride, but softened by reflection. He apologized, not with scripted words or shallow regret, but with a sincerity shaped by the lessons of the morning. His voice trembled as he acknowledged how wrong he had been, and how deeply he wished he could take back the moment that had caused so much harm. The biker accepted the apology with a nod, showing once again that forgiveness is strongest when given freely, without expectation. As the apology settled into the air, the crowd watched something shift between them, not erasing the past, but rewriting the meaning of it. The bikers, sensing that their purpose had been fulfilled, began preparing to leave. Helmets were strapped on, engines ignited, and the soft rumble of hundreds of motorcycles created a rhythm that felt almost ceremonial. The rich man and his wife stood together, holding hands for the first time in what seemed like years, united by the vulnerability of the moment. Before mounting their bikes, a few riders approached the wealthy couple and encouraged them to remember what they had witnessed. That compassion builds bridges where judgment builds walls, and that no amount of wealth can replace the value of a humble heart. The wife nodded gratefully, absorbing every word, while the rich man silently committed himself to becoming better, not out of fear, but out of respect for the people who had shown him the truth with such grace. As the bikers rode away, the rumble of engines echoed through the town like a final reminder, not of intimidation, but of unity, loyalty, and the quiet power of standing together. The rich man watched them disappear down the road, understanding that they had given him far more than a lesson. They had given him a chance to rediscover the man he once hoped to be, leaving him with a truth he would carry for the rest of his life: that respect, once given freely, has the power to change everything. As the dust settled and the roar of engines faded into the horizon, the rich man remained standing at the edge of his driveway, feeling the weight of a moment that had changed him far more than he expected. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, carrying the echoes of everything he had learned. He realized that true wealth has little to do with money and everything to do with humility, courage, and the capacity to see value in others. The bikers had arrived as a force, but they left as a reminder, leaving him with a truth that would linger long after the morning sun disappeared. His wife stood beside him, watching the long line of riders curve down the road like a living ribbon of loyalty and grace. For her, the moment was a turning point, a chance for her household to realign itself with the values she believed in. She felt a quiet gratitude for the strangers who had shown her husband what she had been unable to teach alone. And as the town slowly returned to life, she knew they would both carry this experience forward, using it as a foundation to rebuild their home with more compassion and understanding. The neighbors who witnessed the scene dispersed with a mix of awe and reflection. They had expected confrontation, but instead they had seen humanity unfold in one of its purest forms. The bikers, often judged by their appearance, had shown a grace that challenged every stereotype the town held. The wealthy man, once defined by arrogance, had revealed vulnerability. And somewhere in the middle, a community had been reminded that dignity does not belong to the privileged. It belongs to everyone willing to treat others with respect. As the day grew quieter, the mocked biker took one last look at the mansion from the back of his motorcycle. He wasn't thinking about the insult anymore. He was thinking about the transformation that had taken place. He understood that sometimes life uses the most unexpected moments to open doors inside people, allowing them to see the world from a new perspective. And as he rode away, he hoped the rich man would hold on to the lesson, not as a wound, but as a beginning, a chance to become someone who builds rather than belittles. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on the kind of world we are all shaping together, take a moment to join this journey. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps carry stories like this further, reminding others that empathy, respect, and courage still matter deeply in a world that often forgets them.